quiet, atmospheric tone. A driver is isolated on the old highway near Ghaziabad. The time is exactly 2:15 a.m., the one-year anniversary of their mother's death. The driver is physically exhausted, but the weight of the loss makes it impossible to find rest. Sudden loss creates an emotional vacuum. When someone passes before a final conversation can happen, the surviving mind gets trapped in a cycle of unresolved guilt, replaying unsaid goodbyes in the dark. Into that specific void, an anomaly appears on the highway. A glowing neon sign cuts through the storm, broadcasting an invitation explicitly designed for those caught in this cognitive loop. This liminal space is a transitional boundary, a psychological waiting room. As this schematic shows, the diner bridges a subject from holding on to letting go. Entry requires specific parameters to align: extreme physical exhaustion, a 2:15 a.m. timestamp, heavy rain, and active unresolved trauma. The human brain cannot process sudden grief in a vacuum. It requires a highly structured, rule-based environment like this to safely confront trauma without the risk of a complete psychological breakdown. Inside the diner, the environment provides a stark contrast to the storm outside. The internal architecture is hyper-personalized, replacing the cold vacuum of the highway with a manufactured sense of home. The system operates through a sensory anchor. By feeding the visitor deeply familiar data, the environment grounds the subject's consciousness, making the impossible reunion feel undeniably real. These inputs are precise: the smell of filter coffee with 2 spoons of sugar and fresh pakoras, the visual of a specific blue salwar kameez, the tactile warmth of a hand. These markers are designed to lower the subject's natural skepticism. Generic comforts are ineffective against deep grief. To stabilize the subject, the environment must synthesize these exact cultural and personal details, creating a space where the brain stops fighting the illusion. Once the subject is grounded, the system initiates a confessional protocol. In this zero-judgment space, the driver is finally permitted to voice the heavy guilt of not visiting enough during their mother's illness. The system responds by retrieving forgotten data, childhood memories of hidden chocolates and the first day of school. It uses these positive reinforcements to counter the subject's self-imposed narrative of failure. By combining these sensory triggers with the release of the confessional, the diner's architecture achieves its primary goal. It systematically replaces the subject's guilt with total, absolute absolution. However, this reunion is defined by a rigid temporal boundary. Liminal spaces are inherently unstable. A transitional threshold cannot be occupied as a permanent residence. This leads to the system's most critical constraint. There is an absolute limit to the interaction. As the mother explains, there is only one goodbye allowed. When the driver asks to stay, the request is denied. The system enforces an immediate eviction, preventing the visitor from becoming trapped in the past. Lingering in a state of active grief is dangerous. If the diner were a permanent space, the subject would lose the ability to function in the present, effectively ending their own life to stay in a memory. The exit protocol is executed with precision: a final hug that smells of jasmine oil, a strict instruction never to look back, and the acknowledgement that this specific window of time has closed forever. The healing power of the Midnight Reunion Cafe is found in its expiration date. Without this forced eviction, true closure remains impossible. The driver returns to the highway, and the diner vanishes. The physical world shows no trace of the building, but the psychological landscape of the driver has been permanently altered. But the system leaves behind a physical artifact. This coffee cup, discovered in the car the next morning, serves as tangible evidence that the experience was not a hallucination, but a functional intervention. This artifact anchors the psychological shift. It allows the mind to accept that the absolution received was real, providing a foundation for the subject to move forward without the weight of their previous guilt. Over time, the sensory memories, the jasmine and the coffee, change their function. They are no longer triggers for the 2:15 a.m. trauma loop. Instead, they become quiet markers of a completed process. The transaction is complete. The heavy, exhausting burden of the past has been exchanged for a new directive to operate freely in the present. The ultimate goal of bereaving is not to erase the person, but to transform the relationship with their absence. By engineering this final goodbye, the mind finally ends its year-long vigil. It secures the permission it needed to finally go to sleep and wake up ready to live.